The topic, of course, as we said, is conversion, proselytizing, and salvation outside of the faith. In order to begin talking about the subject from a Jewish perspective, I have to tell you something about Judaism, which distinguishes, I think, Judaism from Christianity and Islam. Islam is religion. Christianity, in all its branches, is religion. But we Jews are certainly not merely a congregation of believers. Judaism is certainly not just a religion. It's much, much, much more. It's true that Judaism has a religion. The Jewish people practice or don't practice, but are part of the Jewish religion. We have a myriad of demands and actions that orient us towards God and the world, but being a Jew is much more simply than practicing the religion. We have a culture. We have a language, but Judaism is even much more. The Jewish people, there's the phrase, is much more than religion, much more than culture, much more than language. I already said people, and that's really the key to understanding what we are. The Jewish people is an extended family. An extended family that throughout the ages has grown into a people, into a body politic, and I'd say also a nation. It's the Jewish people, family, nation. And who exactly is that nation? It's the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and his 4 wives, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah, the descendants of that family. I'm talking very literally, not figuratively. That is the Jewish people. If you're born into that family, you are a Jew. And if you're not born into the family, until I explain more, you're not a Jew. You're not a member of the family. And if you're part of the family, you're part of that global tribe, that global nation. And if not, not. Now, if you really want to join the family, which means to gain citizenship into the nation, you can apply to be naturalized into the nation. That's what we call conversion. But on the basis of what I just said, it's clear that conversion is not merely a religious process. It's not just an enlightenment of faith. It's really becoming one with a different culture, a new family, a nation, a body politic, which means you have to take upon yourself not just belief and not just actions, but it's a whole family culture. It's a new language. Therefore, you have to become part of our mission, our national heritage. It's a new collective identity and a memory. It's much more and much more difficult than converting into, as far as I understand, converting into Islam or converting into Christianity. And that brings me to the next point. Since we're a family and not just a faith, we're perfectly fine if you don't join our family. We're not out to get new family members. It's not a major interest of ours. We're not there to convince people to throw their faith into the Jewish people. The opposite. We actually do a little bit or even a lot to discourage people from joining our family. It's really hard. You have to remake yourself into a new person. Lots of different obligations and liabilities. According to our theology, it's just not necessary. Stay in your religion, stay as part of the culture that you're brought up in, and be the best Christian and the best Muslim that you can. That's my introduction. So now we have the doctrine. All I have to do is flesh that out. That was all. I'm not going to say it, not a lot more than that. So, let's see. The Jewish people have no desire to have Judaism conquer the world. But what we do want to do is to bring blessing to the world. Going back to Genesis 12, that this people, these descendants of Abraham, are meant to be, all the nations of the world will be blessed through you. And actually, I have on the sheet that I gave out, I hope that most of you have sheets. Any extras there? No extras. And probably people who just came in don't have. So is it possible to share a little bit? Anyone not have? In the back, people don't have? Very good. Appreciate it. So I quoted there from Genesis, the Lord said to Abram, who later is called Abraham, I will make of you a great nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed through you. So what does it mean? That the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have a desire and a mission that the rest of the world will be blessed through us. So I brought here Deuteronomy to kind of flesh out what that means. I'm just going to read. See, I've imparted to you
laws and rules as the Lord my God has commanded me, for you to abide by in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. Observe them faithfully, for that will be proof of your wisdom and discernment to other peoples. When hearing of all these laws will say, surely that great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what great nation is there? This is what people will say, that has a God so close at hand as
The Lord our God whenever we call upon him. What great nation has laws and rules as perfect as all these teachings that I set before you this day? So the object is for the Jewish people to live our life, live our culture, live as our religious family, and not to bring others into our family, but they will see and like something about it, be inspired by it, that our religious and ethical and national system will inspire inspiration among the peoples of the world, to bring people to think about God and his wisdom, to motivate nations to try to emulate the teachings of our scripture. Another verse, next verse on the sheet there, Exodus, right before the Ten Commandments. And you shall be for me a nation of priests and a holy people. So on the one hand, the holy people, the Jewish people, are separate families, separate culture, separate being. But on the other hand, priests are ministers, priests pastor, they serve their flock. And the Jewish people are meant to serve the world in the sense of serving as a light unto the nations. I'm quoting them from Isaiah, right? To serve as a model of ethical monotheism to the rest of the world. And I read from Isaiah, it's right there on the sheet. I, the Lord, in my grace, have summoned you, in the plural, speaking to the Jewish people, and have grasped you by the hand. I created you and appointed you as a covenant people, a light unto the nations. And another verse, I'll make you a light unto the nations, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. So we see ourselves as chosen by God to live according to a higher religious, moral, ethical standard, and to thereby show the world a path towards God and proper living. Now, these higher standards, in and of themselves, as they're set down in our Torah, exclusively for our family, but we believe that by seeing them and contemplating them from up close and from afar, that others will be enlightened and uplifted to understand our way of life, and perhaps something of it will rub off among other nations and other individuals. It's a matter of being a model, right? A showcase to bring the ideals to the rest of the world, to help the world lift itself up by its bootstraps. Now, what does it actually mean? How does it work? Let's get into some details. Our minimal mission, let's say, is to bring to the world not our whole way of life, but what we call the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noah, the 7 commandments of the Noahites. Judaism has 613 commandments for the Jewish family, and 7 of them, with a myriad of details, but 7 of them for the rest of the world. And I brought on the sheet to just show you what they are, so I'm just going to read them. There are 6 prohibitions and 1 positive commandment. Prohibition against idolatry. The Jews aren't asking anyone to join our people, but we are asking the rest of the world to refrain from worshiping idols. Prohibition against abusing the name of God. That's what's usually called blasphemy. I wanted to make it clear, though. Abusing the name of God. Prohibition against murder. We want to teach the world not to murder. Prohibition against theft. Prohibition against sexual licentiousness. There's lots of different details and definitions there. Prohibition against cruelty to animals. Pretty interesting that one of our 7 commandments that we want to bring to the rest of the world is cruelty. Prohibition against cruelty to animals. And lastly, the obligation to set up a judicial system that will implement all of the above. And there's lots of details. It's only 7 categories. There's lots of debate also among Jewish scholars as to all the sub-clauses and applications. I want to take like 2 minutes to let you into the world of Jewish scholarship, tell you some of the things we debate. Not concerning Jewish law for Jews, but concerning Jewish law for Gentiles. These are very, very interesting and important disagreement among Jewish scholars concerning that first commandment. It says it's a prohibition against idolatry. Now, some Jewish scholars read it in a minimalistic fashion, that all it requires is that one refrain from actual idolatrous practices. That means bowing down to idols and serving graven images. And according to that interpretation, we're not asking anyone to believe in God. We're just to refrain from believing in many gods. Refrain from worshiping many gods. But if you're an atheist, according to the minimalist definition of the first commandment, you're good to go. No problem. But on the other hand, there is a larger, a maximalist interpretation of the first commandment that says, don't bow down to idols, that tells us that the prohibition against bowing down implies a belief that there aren't many gods and that there is one God. And that interpretation says that the belief in one God is required according to this first commandment. Now, it goes even further. If we hold like those that say that a belief in one God is required, then what's the nature of that belief in one God that's required? And also here, there is a minimalist position and a maximalist position. Some say that the belief in one God that is required here, if a belief in one God is required, has to be a belief in one God that's absolutely and purely monotheistic, like the Muslim belief. That's the maximalist position. Then there's a minimalist position that says that all we require is a basic belief in one God, but it need not be purely monotheistic in the Muslim fashion. And this minimalistic understanding of the obligation of belief in one God says that even a Trinitarian belief system would also be acceptable to be under the rubric of following this first commandment. Let me tell you one more controversy. Jews like controversy. You've noticed this, right? Today, in the past. To what degree do Jews have an obligation to actively propagate the observance of these commandments among non-Jews, among Gentiles? Like I said, we want to model good behavior. That's what we do. We want to model good behavior. We want to model service of God. But does it end there? Or do we actually want to go around and propagate these 7 commandments? And there are those who say that we do have to do so. There are those who say we don't have to do so. And that gets into how do Jews behave in matters of controversy, for example, in American law. Let's say there was a law being discussed in the Supreme Court or in Congress that we thought would move forward observance of one of these 7. So some Jewish positions said we should actually make an effort to make sure that law is passed. And others say it doesn't matter to us. All we do is sit back and model, and you guys can decide whoever you want what your laws are going to be. And I'll say one more controversy. I didn't know I was going to say so many here. One very interesting controversy, which goes as follows. There are some rabbinic authorities that say that we demand, we desire, not only observance of these 7, but also that Gentiles acknowledge the divine source of the 7. Which means that we would require, according to this opinion, that non-Jews recognize not only a God, but a God who reveals commandments at Sinai and brought forth commandments to the world, not only for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles. That's the position of Maimonides. And other sources say, no, we don't care if you understand the source of these laws or not. All you have to do is keep them, observe them, obey them. So what this means, and I'm summarizing what I said about these 7 commandments, there's discussion in some branches of Christian theology of the dual covenant theory. Does Christianity believe in a covenant outside of the covenant in and through Jesus? Well, Judaism certainly does believe in a dual covenant theory. We believe there's one covenant for the Jewish people, 613 commandments, and then there's the second covenant called the covenant of Noah, that requires keeping these 7 commandments. And once a Gentile has fulfilled these 7 commandments, then we say that you're good to go. You're finished. There's no more requirements at all. And from our perspective, you're a good person, you're an ethical person, and you have your card-carrying Noahide, as we call it. It's called living an upright life, religiously, morally, and from our perspective, you have earned a passage to the world to come, to eternal life, and we don't care, we don't ask anything about joining the Jewish people. I have in the sheet there the discussion among the rabbis 2,000 years ago that came to this conclusion that says, you're good to go as a Gentile from a Jewish perspective, even without joining us. Just do the 7. So it's there on the sheet, we should read it, it's really interesting. And this goes back 2,000 years almost. It's from a work called the Tosefta, Tractate Sanhedrin. Rabbi Eliezer says, none of the Gentiles have a portion of the world to come. As the verse says, and it quotes a verse, I think it's from Psalms, the wicked shall go to hell, all the nations who have forgotten God. And then explains how he interprets the verse. The wicked shall go to hell, that part of the verse. These are the evildoers among the Jewish people. And what he's inferring is that the rest of the verse, all the nations who have forgotten God, by definition, all the nations have forgotten God, and they're also going to hell. That's the way Rabbi Eliezer reads it, but we haven't decided, like Rabbi Eliezer, his opinion is rejected. The opinion that says that by definition all the nations have forgotten God, therefore they're going to hell, says Rabbi Yeshua, had the verse said, the wicked shall go to hell, all the nations, and said no more, without the addition of who have forgotten God, then I'd agree with you. It would just say that the wicked shall go to hell and all the nations with them. So all the nations, the Gentile nations are going to hell. But no! The verse clarifies which Gentile nations are going to hell. I can't really say that word, right? Going to hell. The verse says who have forgotten God, which means that the Gentile nations who have not forgotten God, I quote, there are righteous among the nations who have a portion in the world to come. And that was codified in the 12th century by our codified Maimonides on the sheet, the pious of the nations of the world have a portion in the world to come. And our definition of what it means to be pious, what it means to have not forgotten God, is to keep those 7 commandments. And then you're good to go, like I said. Okay, one last matter concerning this Jewish mission to the world as a nation of priests and a light to the nations. This might be interesting to you guys, I hope. It's actually something that I mentioned when we did our dialogue on the Jewish understanding of Jesus. That was many moons ago in the Northway Christian Church. The following, that Judaism sees Christianity and Islam as Jewish success stories. Perhaps I'll say that again. Judaism sees Christianity and Islam as Jewish success stories. Okay? Yes, the Jewish people have suffered tremendous persecution and suffering at the hands of Islamic Christianity, but still, from our perspective, they have adopted the banner of ethical monotheism and taken upon themselves the 7 commandments that I just discussed. And of course, much more than that. So we have succeeded in our mission of spreading a minimal amount of ethical monotheism through the world, through Jesus and Muhammad, and for that we say hallelujah. That we really say we've had some success here. The world today knows the laws of Moses in this form or that form through the efforts of Muhammad and through the efforts of Jesus and his followers. And just to make sure that you don't think that I'm making this up, I put on the sheets there a quote from Maimonides, our greatest codifier in the 12th century in Egypt. And I'm just going to read it. I read it again a year ago, but I'll read it again. Jesus of Nazareth. Nevertheless, the intent of the Creator of the world is not within the power of man to comprehend. For, paraphrasing Isaiah, his ways are not our ways, nor are his thoughts our thoughts. End quote. Ultimately, all the deeds of Jesus of Nazareth, and not Ishmaelite, meaning Muhammad, who arose after him, only served to pave the way for the coming of King Messiah and for the improvement of the entire world, Tikkun Olam, motivating the nations to serve God together, as it is written in the prophet Spanya, I will make the nations pure of speech, so that they will all call upon the name of God and serve him with one purpose. And Maimonides goes on and says, how will this come about? The entire world has already become filled with talk of the Messiah, as well as of the Torah and the commandments, and it's happened through Jesus and Muhammad. These matters have been spread to faraway places and among members of nations of uncircumcised hearts who discuss these matters as well as commandments of the Torah. And I'm going to begin something else. Take 5 seconds to rest. So I said that we don't make any effort to attract converts. But you're probably asking, if someone really, really, really wants to convert to Judaism and really wants to try, how does it work? So I'll tell you on one foot. You see that I'm standing on one foot? That's an expression in Hebrew. So here's again the authoritative ruling from Maimonides on the sheets in front of you. Moshe Rabbeinu, that's Hebrew for Moses our teacher, bequeathed the Torah and the commandments only to the Jewish people. As it says in a verse, an inheritance for the congregation of Jacob. And, quote, as well as to any one of the other nations who desire to convert. So there is a possibility of conversion. It exists, the institution, but for historical reasons, historically conditioned reasons, Judaism is very hesitant about allowing people into the conversion process. There are some Jewish communities, I've heard that the Syrian Jewish communities, and many in South America have a policy, no conversion at all. No one else is allowed in, for no reason. There are other communities that allow conversion, but very, very rarely. It's really, in Chabad, for example, the Lubavitcher movement, very, very rarely. And other movements within Judaism simply make it difficult and discourage people from trying. Now, even if we wouldn't make it artificially difficult, it's really a very arduous process. You're existentially taking upon yourself a completely new identity, breaking into a new family and culture, learning a new language, acquiring new collective memories, and immersing yourself in a whole new lifestyle and beliefs. And just to give you an example, traditionally, this has been like this for 1,500 years, what has that meant? So first of all, it means learning and practicing the basics of Jewish life and Jewish law, observance of Sabbath, of keeping kosher, holidays, daily blessings, prayers 3 times a day, all the varied laws of sexual relations. If a person is married to a non-Jewish spouse and they want to convert, no, can't do it. Because one of the laws of Judaism is not to have sexual relations with a non-Jew. So if you're married, and I've had tens of cases like that, people come to you want to convert, I try as much as possible to convince them no, and then they finally give in for some reason. They say they're married, no way to do it. Because I don't want someone to get divorced. Having a family is very important. They either have to get divorced, which we don't want at all, or their spouse would have to convert together with them. So they're learning Hebrew, learning basic prayers in Hebrew, that's hard. Being socialized into a Jewish community in a synagogue framework, that's hard. Committing to raise your children as Jews, send them to Jewish schools, that's hard. The process, at least the way I conducted when I had conversion candidates, takes between 1 and 3 years. When the overseeing rabbi feels that the candidate is ready, then he or she is brought before a rabbinic court of 3 rabbis, and the court tests their knowledge, their observance of Judaism, their sincerity, and if they then are ready to declare absolutely, without any ifs, ands, and buts, their allegiance to the Jewish people for the rest of their life, then we're willing to convert them. A male is circumcised, not by the rabbis, although it depends, actually. If the person, when he was born, a male, of course, only males, just get that right. If the person was circumcised as an infant in the hospital, then all we do is take a drop of blood as a symbolic circumcision, and that actually the rabbis can do. I've actually been involved in that. 1 drop of blood. If the person wasn't circumcised as an infant, then you have to go to the hospital and do a ritual circumcision under anesthesia before you can convert. After the circumcision, or the drop of blood, the person immerses himself in the mikveh, in a ritual body of water, and upon arising from that body of water, the person is now Jewish, given a Hebrew name, a new name, that they shows themselves in consultation with the rabbi, and now they're in person. And I think at this point I've spoken long enough. So leave the podium for Doug.